The online course industry is facing its biggest shakeup in a decade, maybe ever. Google search traffic has fallen off a cliff for many businesses. AI is changing online learning behavior. Fewer courses are being purchased overall. And email marketing, the lifeblood of most course businesses, is seeing a tangible drop in engagement. Now, as someone who's worked with over 200 online education businesses in the last year, I get to see inside many businesses grappling with these challenges. And I recently made a webinar unpacking exactly what's changing and sharing strategies from those people who are successfully navigating this new landscape. So the video today is a tighter, edited version of that session. We will cover the 3 big shifts that I see changing the online course world and how they're impacting businesses across the industry. But more importantly, I'm going to show you how to not just defend against these changes, but use them as a springboard to build a stronger, more differentiated business. I think more than any time since I first got started online, this is not business as usual right now. You have to adapt. I'm going to show you how I'm thinking about this and how I'm helping others do that too. Now, I originally planned to present this using my lovely whiteboard, but we ran into some technical difficulties. So while the visuals might not be as dynamic as usual, since we had to switch to screen share, the content should be just as valuable as ever. Let's jump in. Hello, everybody, and welcome to AI, Google, and the Future of Course Businesses. I am going to aim to go for about maximum 1 hour, but probably somewhere between 30 to 45 minutes. And I'm going to get through a lot of stuff. This is a big topic I've been writing about for the last couple of weeks. I've had an absolute flurry of replies over email from people who are experiencing a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about here. A lot of people have been saying things to the tune of, this is what you're talking about here has described exactly what's happening to me. First of all, I'm going to start with the TLDR because I think this is quite important. The TLDR of all of this is that it's not AI. Everyone thinks that AI is destroying their course businesses. That's not what's happening. At least that's my opinion. I actually think there's more opportunity than ever. And if we see all of this stuff through, then I think what's changing now is going to result in better business for everybody. We're all going to have stronger businesses as a result. We're going to have stronger brands. But the big caveat here is you do need to adapt. Business as usual, the way it's been for the last 10, 15 years is not an option. Okay, so this is the main thing I want everyone to take from this. You do need to adapt. Luckily, that's what we're talking about today. So this is what we're going to cover, what's changing, how to respond, and the Q&A. So what is changing? Well, I have the very fortunate position of seeing across lots of businesses in the education landscape. I didn't have that before for many years, for 10 years or so. It was just me and my team and story learning. And, I knew kind of what worked for us, but not much else. But as I started working with other people, seeing other businesses, I really started to get a real view of the whole landscape. And that's been very, very useful in the last year or so as things have started to change. Okay. There are 3 main symptoms that I'm seeing here. First of all, Google search traffic has fallen off a cliff. Secondly, we're seeing fewer course purchases in general. And 3, we're seeing a big change for the first time really that I can remember in email engagement. Now, this is going to be most relevant for course creators. If you're a business that sells courses as your main business model, this is going to be most relevant for you. But I think the lessons that we're going to draw from this are going to be relevant to you, whatever you do, whether you're a coach or a consultant, run membership sites, run cohorts, media businesses, whatever it may be. These are the 3 things that are changing. I'm going to run through each of these one by one, and then I'm going to show you how I think we should be responding. Google search traffic. Now, this is the point where I was supposed to be drawing with my magic pen, and that's not going to happen now. And so I'm going to do my best with lines. Now, there are 3 patterns I've been seeing with Google search traffic. And this started happening mostly around October 2023. Pattern number 1 is that Google search traffic has done this. And there are a lot of businesses that have lost 95% or more of their traffic. However, another type of business which has done this, search traffic has dropped by about 50%. This happened to us at Story Learning, FYI. That's what we're dealing with. And there are plenty of businesses that are in that situation as well. And then there is a third type of business that's doing this and going from strength to strength. That's great for those businesses. I think it's the minority. I've seen this happen across so many different businesses. I cannot explain what accounts for this change. I cannot explain why some businesses are having their search traffic go up. And these are large businesses, like high traffic businesses, while other very high traffic businesses have completely tanked. It has something to do with the way that Google are operating. And, specifically what seems to have happened is that, so October 2023, ChatGPT launches and Google goes into a blind panic. It changes the way that it does search. And so whereas you may have had plenty of articles ranking on page 1 of Google previously, what's happened now is you go into Google and you've got Gemini, the Gemini thingy at the top that gives you your quick answer. You've then got half a page of ads, and then you've got like Reddit responses and community forums and stuff. Then your beautiful page 1 results is now ranking on page 2, 3, 4, and it's essentially nowhere. So that's the big change that's happened. There are exceptions and things to note about this. We'll get onto that a little bit later. The people who are most affected by this are high search volume businesses. Okay. If you've never had a lot of traffic from SEO, or SEO hasn't been a big priority for you, then you won't have noticed a massive difference. The businesses that have really suffered are those who have traditionally had most of their traffic from search, and those are the businesses that need to have the most response here. But there's also a pattern between the generic and the specific. So for the most part, if you are in a niche that's quite generic, that covers a very broad topic, you've probably been hit harder. Whereas those people who are in niches who do something a lot more specific have not been hit that hard. And again, there's a big lesson in here that we'll get to later. We're also seeing in the ecosystem that there are fewer purchases going on. Now, the way that this seems to be manifesting most of all is in the back end. All right. So the typical thing that we're seeing right now is that you will have people come to your website, they will be opting in as before. For the most part, they'll be buying on the front end just like they were before, but there are fewer back end purchases happening. Now, the reason that this matters is because a lot of course businesses build their entire business model on regular promotions every week or every 2 weeks or every month. That's baked into the business model. So if you, much like we traditionally have at Story Learning, if you have relied on, say, 50% of your revenue coming from purchases on the back end, this is a problem because people are buying less. Now, why is this happening? Here's my take on it. I don't think that there's any kind of fatigue with courses as a general medium. People are still buying courses as much as they ever were. But what's happening, I think, is that people have come to realize that buying endless courses, collecting endless courses is not going to solve their problems. We can make, millions selling courses, but if our students aren't getting results, that's not really ideal. And so I think the reason we're seeing a fatigue with courses is because people are realizing, like, I'm not getting results. I'm not getting the outcome I wanted. And so I'm going to start spending my time and my money doing things that are actually going to get me those results. That's the first thing. The second thing is that AI is providing new options. This varies from industry to industry, but take the language learning industry, for example. Now, for a very long time, we had courses that would teach you languages. If you wanted to learn Spanish, you could take the Learn Spanish course. But if you wanted to practice speaking Spanish with someone, you'd have to go and hire a human tutor to practice speaking Spanish with. What AI is now doing is enabling you to speak Spanish with the AI, which means you now don't have to pay $50 an hour to speak Spanish with somebody. This is legitimately providing a very useful new option to someone who is learning languages. And so for me, it's not so much that AI is causing problems for courses. Rather it's that AI is creating new options for people to learn in different ways. And that's what I'm seeing in across different industries. Again, those industries where AI is proven particularly disruptive, you're seeing a knock-on impact on courses. But the good news is that the willingness to spend is still high. And I'm seeing people spend as much money as before, even more money. And I think the reason is that they're willing to spend on outcomes and results in particular, and for quality information and for quality, brand-based information. So that's what we're seeing happening there. And lastly, email engagement. Email is still king when it comes to relationship building, when it comes to sales. But what we're seeing is a general decline in the level to which people are engaging with email. What does this mean? It doesn't mean you should stop sending emails. It doesn't mean you should stop growing your email list, none of that. But again, from the perspective of a course business that relies on lots of traffic and then sending emails to sell courses, what that means is that one of the core components of your sales model is now not working so much because people are not responding to emails in the way they were. I was chatting to my friend Scott about this the other day, and he was trying to figure out what was going on. And it's not clear, because it's not necessarily the case that open rates are dropping. It's not necessarily the case that emails are all landing in spam or people are unsubscribing. It's not really that's happening. It seems to be just that there's a general just depression in sentiment. The way that that my friend Scott described it, and I think it's an interesting narrative, is that basically since COVID, so 2020, 2021, we had this flood of new education businesses joining the market. We also had the growth of the arrival of the editorial newsletter on the scenes. All these editorial newsletters like The Hustle and Morning Brew, these big institutional newsletters. And as a result, people have just been getting a lot more email in their inbox. And there's a sense of overwhelm from tons of email. There's a sense of probably more competition. And as a result, people are just paying a lot more attention. And the reason that this is a problem, and you have to please forgive my slides. The reason this is a problem is that, again, if you think about the way that for a lot of larger course businesses, if you think about the evolution of these large course businesses, then what happened was over the course of 10 years or 10, 15 years growing these businesses, we start off sending emails ourselves. Okay, the creator, the founder sends emails to the list and we have that close connection. But then what happens is we now start to do email on a more serious automated scale. So now we have teams who are managing the sending of emails. We produce a YouTube video and we email that video out. We do email. And you can see I've written down here before it got screwed up. And it's almost like factory email marketing. We turn it into something that we do at scale because we want to be able to write to all of our audience. But what happens is the creator or the founder gets gradually removed from that direct line of contact with the audience. And so this thing that we've been doing of scaling our email marketing is actually now backfiring because there's a ton more competition. People are being a lot more discerning about the emails that they get in their inbox. And so this is now coming back to bite us a little bit. That's what we're seeing happening. First of all, search traffic. The truth of the matter is that if you've always had a lot of traffic from Google, then the writing has been on the wall for many years. Okay, there's a lot of people who really should have diversified away from Google traffic, but didn't. The key lesson, the key thing to take from this is still to diversify. If you are still expecting to reverse the decline in SEO, I would not. I would be still planning to diversify. In terms of how, I think for most educators, if you have traditionally been reliant on SEO, there's only really one good viable alternative now for new traffic at scale. That's YouTube. So by what I mean, if the question is, how do I keep my business model the same kind of passive course selling business model and replace the traffic from SEO, then YouTube is the only way of doing that. Podcasts just don't give you enough traffic. They're too hard to grow. Affiliates, sponsorships, partners, you can't get that same level of traffic. And so I'm very, very pleased that at Story Learning, we went hard into YouTube in 2021 because now we've got a meaningful part of our traffic and revenue coming from YouTube. So I think that YouTube is still growing very, very strongly across the board. So that's where I would recommend looking. But also, we'll come to this in terms of from a business model perspective a little bit later, but also in particular, I think you want to be looking at partnerships, sponsorships, and paid advertising, because the issue with YouTube, a little bit like SEO, is it's all algorithm based, and anything that's algorithm based can ultimately be taken from you at any point. People have seen this on Twitter over the last year or so. Businesses running on SEO have seen that, and the same. Do not think that can't happen to you on YouTube as well. It can. There was a weird time about 9 months or so ago when all YouTubers had all their views dropped by 60%. Nobody knew why. Turns out that YouTube was experimenting with some different type of prioritizing smaller channels. And so overnight, people found their YouTube videos views had dropped by 60% or so. Now, it came back a couple of weeks later. This is a big red flag, okay? As long as you are reliant on algorithm-based traffic, you are always exposed. So yes, it makes sense to move from SEO to YouTube. I think that's the best long-term move. But also, and this is a key thing, that it's really important to be able to drive traffic and sales from manual, predictable, repeatable mechanisms, and partnerships, sponsorships, paid advertising, the sort of things we want to be looking at. But in order to do this, your business model needs to adapt, because partnerships and sponsorships are lower volume of traffic, and paid advertising obviously comes at a cost. So while we need to look to platforms like YouTube to replace SEO. We also need to be developing these types of more manual, more reliable things that are not algorithm based, and looking at how we can adapt our business model in order to be profitable doing that. Most course businesses do not work to paid advertising, full stop, right? This is not 2015 anymore. Costs are too high. There's too much fatigue with courses. So paid advertising, it can work, but for the most part, courses do not sell to paid advertising. And similarly with partnerships, sponsorships, you just can't get enough traffic to make enough sales. So your business model has to adapt. And this is the sort of thing that it's going to look like. If we kind of contrast the 2015 digital product course model with what that's going to have to look like from 2025 moving forward, we have to move from high volume of traffic to anticipate a low volume of traffic. Okay, now, if you manage to become a YouTube superstar, then great. Some people will be able to maintain their high traffic for longer, but we need to be planning to operate in a low traffic environment and asking ourselves the question, if we find ourselves in a low traffic environment, does the business model have to adapt in order to still be profitable from that? A lot of people who did SEO or make YouTube videos were used to cheap traffic. Similarly with people who get big on social, you can get tons and tons of views on social media. I would refer you to the earlier point about algorithm-based stuff. It's great while it lasts, but the rug can be pulled under you at any moment. So we need to plan to move away from cheap traffic or free traffic to actually having to pay for traffic and asking ourselves, what does the business model have to do? How does it have to perform if we are now paying for our traffic? Generally speaking, we're going to want to move from low-ticket products towards high-ticket products. Why? Because there's no margin in low ticket products. People are not buying courses like they used to, and there's not enough margin once you've actually paid for the customer acquisition. The benefit of higher ticket offerings is that you can afford to buy your traffic, buy your leads, and still have profit left over, right? If you're paying $200, $300 to acquire a customer, your course costs $200, $300, then there's no profit in there. As a corollary to that, that means we need to plan to be moving from a more passive sales model to a more active sales model. And you have to see the earlier point about email. If people are in general less receptive to email, if they're just not responding to course offers like they did, well, then we need to be offering more substantial solutions that involve an active sales process. All of this here is what no course creator wants to hear, and I'm well aware of that. But we have to contend with this. And this is why I think ultimately it's a great opportunity if we do contend with it. Why? Because if you have a business that can be profitable with a low volume of traffic, if you are paying for that traffic and using paid marketing to acquire your customers, selling high ticket stuff with great margins and being able to convert people in an active way, that's a great business that can last forever. That's the kind of business that really is strong, because if Facebook ads somehow disappear, well, you can still buy your traffic from LinkedIn. Doesn't matter. Your business model is set up for that. The entire danger with the kind of high volume, cheap traffic, low ticket model of courses is that if anything stops working, you've got no way to replace it. Right? If SEO stops sending you 100,000 visits a month, how are you going to replace that level of volume? So because we are seeing this general fatigue with information, and you can now go on ChatGPT and get any information you want instantly, because people are realizing that just buying another course with more information is not going to change my life. What we need to do as educators is focus much more on delivering results. Earlier, we talked about how, when you're selling to humans, then you have to contend with human behavior. Humans do not follow through. They don't take action. They don't get results from the courses that they buy. And so how can we focus on actually delivering results? Think of it like this. It's the difference between, hey, learn this thing versus get this outcome. An entrepreneur I'm working with who, what she does is she teaches doctors to pass their consultant interviews. Now, she could offer a course that says, learn all of my interview techniques to pass your consultant interview first time. Here's your $500 course, download it and get all the information. And that would be a very nice passive lifestyle business. Instead, what she does is she runs cohorts, and she says, it's a 10-week course or an 8-week course. I'm going to train you to pass your consultant interview, and we're going to have live practice. You're going to be able to submit videos to, every day for feedback. You're going to get, live personal interview practice. That's what I'm talking about when you are helping them get the outcome. You're not just giving them the information. You're creating the learning environment where they can actually get that outcome. And the way that we do that is through all the stuff that's not passive digital courses, right? So it's cohorts, it's coaching, it can be software of some kind of one-to-one interaction, or even community with accountability. This is the kind of thing you have to do if you want to help people get outcomes. You can't rely on them going through the courses by themselves and getting the results. How do we do this though? How do we help people get this outcome? My business, Story Learning, as a language learning business, it's pretty difficult to help people get an outcome because learning a language takes years. I know Duolingo says it takes 7 days or whatever, but it doesn't. It takes years, and you have to stick with it for a very long time. This presents a challenge for us because if we say to someone, you'll be fluent in French by Christmas, it doesn't pass the sniff test. What I think is going to be very interesting, I'm going to see a lot of over the coming years, is people moving from the generic through to the specific. So for example, rather than all the ways you can progress in your career, here's an 8-week course to get a 50% pay rise by June. Rather than teaching vets all the best practice for surgery in their veterinary clinic, it's like, here's how you can extract canine teeth because you were never taught that in vet school. Moving from the generic to the specific. Now, why does that matter? For lots of reasons. When you make a specific promise and you help people with a specific solution, you have higher authority because it's more credible. You're going to end up getting more search volume as well, because when people do search for that specific thing, you pop up because you're the only one doing it. It's easier to get results because you're not promising the moon, you're just promising a very specific thing. And also because you're promising that very specific thing, you can command a lot higher pricing. If I'm promising you that you will pass your consultant interview in 2 months' time, you will pay me pretty much whatever you can afford because it's that important, promising a very specific result. And so what this kind of speaks to is niching down even further. It's not enough anymore to be the email copywriting teacher. You have to be the person that helps D2C brands increase their customer retention by 50% through email copywriting. That's the kind of thing we're talking about, because then it's more credible. You have more authority. People can find you more easily. It's easier to get results and you can charge more. Also, when you can charge more, guess what happens? It's then easier to buy traffic. This is one of the key business model things that I think people don't really understand. In order to be able to pay for traffic to acquire customers and still make a profit, you've got to have margin. And there's a world of difference between a $300 course and a $3,000 product. If it costs you $300 to acquire a customer and you're selling a $3,000 product, $700 of margin right there. Okay. So the more that you can figure out how to charge more money, the easier it is to buy traffic and the more stable your business model can become. This is the direction of travel. And on that topic, ads are still working great. Okay. Not so much for course businesses, but there are plenty of people that I know, people that I'm working with who get all of their traffic from ads, from Facebook ads, from Google ads. They're working great. But if your Google traffic has gone off a cliff, ads are still there. They're still working great. Yes, they're a lot more expensive than they were in 2015, but they're still working great. You've just got to have higher pricing in order to be able to profitably acquire customers. We've seen that on the back end, we're getting fewer purchases. So what I'm seeing is it's just as easy to acquire customers as before because problems don't disappear. I was chatting with my PT, who is a Tesla driving personal trainer, exactly the kind, about my age, and great guy, exactly the kind of person you would expect to be like all over AI and ChatGPT and all of that. He never used it. He didn't know that you could interact with ChatGPT. I tell this story because we're in this online world where we're very, very exposed to these things. But most people out in the real world still have the same old problems as they always did. And those problems aren't going anywhere. And people are still willing to spend money to solve problems. So it's true that we are seeing fatigue with courses in general because people kind of know that more courses aren't going to solve their problem and change their life. But if you can offer the right solution, the willingness to spend is still very, very high because problems don't disappear. So what does that mean? What do you do if people are still willing to spend money on problems, but they're just buying less often? You'll notice a similar pattern. It's not going to be viable to run email promotions every week or twice a month or even every month. But instead, we want to be running less frequent, more occasional, high-value promotions. And so moving from running email promotions every week through to occasional promotions, occasional launches that really pack a punch. Stuff that people are going to sit up and take notice of and say, hey, this is going to solve my problem. I want it. We need to be able to channel attention more effectively. Rather than this passive model, we need to be moving to a more engaged model where maybe you're doing sales calls, maybe you're doing webinars, maybe you have some kind of interaction in communities. I don't know. You might find you're a lot more willing to do that kind of thing if you're selling for a much higher price. And so we're moving from the regular to the occasional, from the passive to the engaged, and from the cheap to the expensive. There's an entrepreneur that I'm working with, who we were looking at their front end automated email sequences. They were selling something for quite cheap, about $50. And when we were looking at this, I came at this from the perspective of like, well, what do we know? We know that there are 5% of people out there who will spend lots of money to get the complete solution, to get the solution that they really want. And so what about if we move from selling a very low ticket thing on the front end to something a lot more expensive, more complete solutions to really solve that problem that we know is still there? Maybe we can have tiers with different levels of access. You can buy the course, or you can pay even more and have some one-to-one access, or a community or something like that. Create the ability to spend more money and invest more money with you. And we found that when we moved from charging around, it was like something, I forget the exact numbers, but like it was an average order value of like 50 up to 500. We 11x'd the revenue that they were getting from those front end email sequences. That's one change here, first of all. The other type of change I think we're going to see is that the things that we're offering on the front end are still going to be just as powerful as ever, and we can make them even more powerful by having more complete solutions. On the back end then, whereas a lot of course-based models are, running 2 promotions a month, having regular promotions throughout the year, we know we've got this fatigue that we're seeing. And so instead of this, what I think is going to be more powerful is to run more occasional big promotions that look more like the old kind of Jeff Walker product launch formula style from back in the day. So it's fewer promotions, but more ambitious in solving people's problems. Now, the other question I've been getting a lot after these emails I sent out was, Olly, does this mean I should stop making courses? And there's quite a few entrepreneurs I'm working with where actually part of our core strategy is building courses. But it's important to understand the function of courses within the overall business model. Okay. So I think it is fair to say that on the whole, a purely passive course-based business model is going to become less and less effective over time. But courses do serve a particular purpose. In particular, courses serve to channel attention. So we've seen already throughout this presentation how we need to be moving to a more ambitious, higher ticket, more expensive, higher touch model, because we can solve problems more credibly and we can afford to buy traffic to acquire those customers, right? But it's also harder to sell high ticket stuff. And so having courses can be a really powerful part of that ecosystem, because if you have a series of low ticket courses, a lot like the kind of courses that I offer on my email list, they're kind of between $100 to $300. They're quite cheap. The aim for me there is not to make money from those courses, but rather it's to channel attention, it's to demonstrate credibility, to help with specific outcomes. And then that is an accelerant that moves people towards your high ticket stuff. So courses that function as a way to channel people towards high ticket stuff still have just as much of a place as ever, because as I keep saying, problems are still there. Problems don't go away. And so people will pay for those for solutions. Big part of that, more and more, is software. Now, I'm reluctant to mention this because I know that for most people, software is just a step too far. I've never personally tackled software as part of my core business because I'm not a tech person. Software scares me. It's not my thing. But I've got to mention it because more than ever before, I'm seeing people who are integrating software into their businesses do really, really well. And I think this is because with the advent of AI, what's happening is there are now ways with AI to make more things legitimately easier. A lot of the, there's a really cool phrase I heard once called tech solutionism. And this came out of the early 2010s where there was this big proliferation in iPhone apps. And it was like, basically it was kind of belief back then that you could make an app that would solve everybody's problems. And I think we all realized pretty quickly that most apps are just crap and they're a waste of time. And we saw this a lot in the language learning space where there was a million language apps and they were all useless. None of them worked. It was just an excuse to build an app. Okay. Particularly with AI now, it is facilitating tech solutions which are legitimately useful and make things legitimately easier. So we're seeing this across the board. I have many friends, many people I know I'm working with who are integrating software. For example, Olly has VoicePal, which helps you speak into your phone basically and then create specific outputs with AI. it's not a gimmick. It's legitimately really useful and speeds up your workflow. One of my, a company that I'm invested in, Language Talk, has what they call Langua, which is AI language learning. And you can practice speaking any language with an AI clone that's incredibly realistic. And you can, if you just want to practice speaking French for 15 minutes, you can. You don't need to book an expensive tutor. So these are examples of solutions that make a problem legitimately better. And this is the question to be asking. In your business, is there a problem that can be made legitimately easier with software? And if it is, if that thing does exist, then I think it's really worth considering. And you don't necessarily have to be you don't at all have to be a developer to do this. So can you go out and find someone who's already developed a similar app and either acquire them or form a partnership agreement? Can you go to someone else in your industry or in a parallel industry who's got a similar app and say, hey, can I license this app from you for my business? So you can skip the whole phase of having to develop it yourself. I think that the businesses that do really well in the coming years are going to lean more and more into software. And so I won't spend any more time on this, but I did want to mention it because especially with AI, but not just with AI, we're seeing consumers very, very willing to pay for apps in particular, but also regular, browser-based software. People will pay for it. And they will keep their subscriptions going for a long time. And so the monthly recurring revenue you can add to your business with software is absolutely immense. Very, very powerful. Email. And I find this super interesting. So we saw earlier how overall engagement and responsiveness is down. And my kind of working hypothesis, this is because of a general feeling of overwhelm, increasing competition, and people being more discerning. And many of us are guilty of a kind of factory email marketing approach. Now, this is the pathway that a lot of larger course businesses take. In the early days, it's just you communicating directly with your audience. Back when I started my blog back in 2013, it was just me on Aweber sending emails to my audience. And I had no idea what I was doing, but it was dynamic, right? And there was this sense that everyone on my email list knew that they were hearing directly from the horse's mouth. That is a big deal. But what happens is as your business grows, you have more processes, you have more team. And this is happened. It's completely what happened to us at Story Learning. So here I am, here's Olly. And then now what's happening is now what Olly does is he records a YouTube video. I send the YouTube video off to the team to edit. That video then passes through to the people who manage the email list, who then decide, okay, well, why don't we take this YouTube video and send that out to the via email to the audience. And by the time it gets to the person who reads the email, the founder is now basically a million miles disconnected from your actual audience. Now, many businesses have some version of this going on. This is one of the reasons that in my business brand, I always send all my emails. I don't use AI to write my emails at ollyrichards.co. It's always me writing the emails. It's always me sending the emails. The reason that I'm doing this webinar today is because I had this, I wanted to pass on the things that I'm seeing. I got a ton of replies back. I thought, okay, this is a hot topic. There's lots of stuff to talk about here. Let's do a webinar. And that's the reason that we're all here. It's the reason we have 350 odd people registered for this thing. It's because I have this direct contact with the email list. But it's very, very common for larger businesses to lose that because you feel like more and more you have to step back. Is that phrase that everyone says, I was told I have to remove myself from the business. Well, that works if you are scaling a traditional company where it keeps growing and you have a bigger management layer and et cetera, et cetera. But for education businesses, which are founder-led, which are content-based, that do not scale exponentially. I released a video a couple of weeks ago called the Circular Org Chart for exactly this point. My view now more and more actually is that us as founders, we have to stay connected and not remove ourselves from the business. Because by doing that, what you achieve is you keep that really valuable connection with the audience. And that's the thing that keeps attention. It's the reason that people will go to you rather than ChatGPT, because they trust you. So when you expand your email operation too quickly, what happens is, for a start, it's very expensive because you're paying your team to manage it. It becomes soulless. It becomes quite repetitive, especially if you're running the same promotions week after week or month after month or year after year. And it also becomes a one-way street of information. With a big business like this, if anyone replies to an email, there's virtually no way it makes its way back to you. It gets picked up by a customer support team. And so your finger is just not on the pulse, and that creates an issue. And so what I think we need to do is more and more treat email like a red carpet and say, we've got this relationship with our audience here. It is to be cherished. How do we make it so that every single thing that lands in their inbox from us or from me as the founder is gold? And there's no sense of disconnect or kind of factory farming email. And so the way that we can do that now, thanks to AI, is to take the content that you're creating, whether that's YouTube videos that have scripts, blog posts that obviously are already text format, podcasts that can be transcribed. This can all be fed into an AI process, which allows you to communicate with your audience. And don't make the mistake of thinking that because it's AI-assisted communication, it's now not valuable. One of the things that I teach in my AI courses, and if you want to learn more about this, you can go to the training page on my website. I have a course called the AI Email Accelerator that teaches exactly this. It uses a principle that I always describe as 10-80-10. And what this is, AI does 80% of the work, but you still feed the input and you still have the final say over everything that goes out. And you use your content that you've already created, that podcast you spent hours recording, the YouTube video you spent all week on, that's golden content. You can feed that to the AI. It can take your original content, which is original IP. It can now fashion that into an email in your voice. You can then check it, finesse it, send it yourself. You've used 80% less of your time, but you've now got a direct line of communication. So it's like founder plus AI is how you are going to be able to maintain the quality of communication for a lot less money, a lot less cost, and still keep your finger on the pulse with your audience. And this, think of it as like a direct line between you and the audience. And this is how I think we have to operate in order to counter this general fatigue we're seeing in email. An email inbox is a lot like the first page of Google. You're either in position number one or you're nowhere. And so I think we have to treat email as absolutely sacred within our businesses. And then, by the way, if you do send the same kind of promotions, if you kind of dig up old courses and send the same kind of promotions over and over as part of your strategy, well, you can use this same AI process to keep your copy fresh, right? If you send out the same offer a few times a year, don't use the same emails. You can use the same AI process to freshen up the copy. And it takes 5 minutes. It's really great. AI Email Accelerator courses shows you how to do exactly that. This does mean change, and it does mean that things have to evolve. But if you embrace this head on, then what's up for grabs is a leaner business with more profit, less headache from operations, less time spent managing people, better outcomes for students because you're focused on actually delivering results, not just information, a stronger bond with your audience, which as educators is super important. A more resilient business because you can now afford to pay to acquire customers. You're going to lose this single channel dependence, which is capable of sinking businesses, and you can move with AI, not against it. So this is what's up for grabs. And I think this is really, really powerful. And there are certain times in the evolution of businesses where you decide whether you move with the times or you don't. This is one of those times right now. And I think, yes, it's challenging for myself personally in story learning. We are doing a lot of work on this right now. We have to, in order to remain future-proofed. So I think it's actually really exciting. And if you embrace this, you end up in a position where you can have a much stronger business that's much more resilient for years to come. Thank you. Before we move to Q&A, a couple of things. If you are, for whatever reason, if you're new here, if you're not on my email list, you can go to ollyrichards.co where you can sign up for my case study, get on the email list, and you can see what my emails are like. You can judge it accordingly. Last thing, I mentioned this back in December when I ran my webinar, my What's Working in Online Education webinar. I actually closed down my one-to-one mentorship last year because I was full, and that's still closed, unfortunately. So I'm not taking on any new mentorship clients, but I am doing a sort of a revolving door type situation. So when one person finishes the 12 months with me, there's a place becomes available, and I do have 2 places becoming available in May in the next few weeks. So if you would like to work with me to help scale your online education business, maybe navigate some of these changes that we've talked about today, then you can apply. There's fairly substantial application form is on my website. You can check that out and apply if you would like to. Again, only 2 spots. They will almost certainly go. So if that's of any interest to you, feel free to head over to my website and apply. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Lots to think about as ever. If you did enjoy this, then you should watch this video next. It's all about everything that's working in online education right now. So if you run an online education business of any kind, this is A to Z of everything that I'm seeing working in the industry, helping businesses grow, stay profitable, and become resilient for the future. So go and check that out.